Thanks everybody for coming. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking a little bit about the knowledge-aware approach as a general approach for managing knowledge. We started last year starting to find better ways to explain why this approach is different than what people normally are experiencing in the organizations, and why we believe this approach, regardless of the technology, is inevitable. It's an inevitable way that technical knowledge will be managed. And I'm going to try to make that point here. So I'm going to use this little map here. We call it an engagement model to kind of walk through the metaphor and the principles behind this approach that we call knowledge aware. Some of you have probably heard this kind of explanation what knowledge aware is before, and hopefully hearing it again will make it sink deeper. And we're always looking for ways to refine this message to make it easier for people to understand why it's different and why it's important. So if any of you, after hearing this kind of explanation of knowledge aware, have a criticism or suggestions to make it more effective, I'd love to hear from you. So find me afterwards and give me your suggestions or critiques or whatever it is, and whatever feedback you have about this message. So I'm not going to go through the full set of messaging here. I'm going to really just talk about the big pictures and the fundamentals. And in the big pictures and fundamentals, we're trying to set the concept, what it is, and then kind of show you more specifically how to go about it, or at least how the Auros software goes about it. So if we open up this big picture here, and it wants me to log in again. Hold on. Okay, we got this idea of a big picture. And let's start with the problem statement. And I've never had anybody disagree. So if somebody disagrees at any point in this, as we go along in this series of arguments, I want to see your hand go up. So as an engineer myself who's done engineering, design and release, manufacturing, I've done systems engineering, I've done pretty much all of it. We're so used to recurring mistakes or design churn, or redesign, or getting to a design review event and saying we missed this, let's go back and check it, that we don't even consider that it was a problem because we're just so used to it. And I love this graphic. It was borrowed from a couple different resources. The guy's expression here is on purpose, so he's not that upset. He's wasting money, but he's not that upset. And does everybody kind of vibe with that? I mean, that we see in our engineering organizations a lot of mistakes, and we just don't really get that upset about it because we're expecting a certain amount. And a lot of these mistakes, the argument goes, is because poor knowledge reuse. Not all of them, but a good portion of these problems arise because we didn't know what our colleague knew. We didn't learn from a past project. We didn't synthesize needs of other stakeholders in an efficient way, and we came out to some problem that we now have to resolve. Right? Sound good? So what we're saying is that with today's technology, that's not what we need. And to kind of prove it or to drive this home, we use this analogy of maps. Now, there's now a generational thing where a lot of the younger people probably in the audience have really not ever had the chance to try to use a map while getting around. Now, I have a personal experience. That's why this particular map was chosen in Bristol, England. A map represents good, right? I mean, you would much rather have a map someplace you've never been than have nothing, right? So it's the document of all the possible turns that you could need in a given location. But does anybody really need every possible turn? You just need the turn that you need next, and then the next, and the next. And anything out of that is not as efficient, right? You really just want what you need. And then, you got to trust the map. You got to, I got this map. It's 10 years old now. There's new roads, and what's all that, right? And so having a map is great, but it's certainly not the experience that we expect. We want something far more efficient. And the map is a document. It's a paper document. It's a static representation of what was known at a given time, and it was published. But what we all expect now is a far different experience, right? Right? This is what we all do. And what is it doing? It's taking knowledge prepared, map tiles and turn algorithms that's been prepared for reuse, that's kept up to date, that we trust, and it's provisioning as you need it, right? So the cell phone that we all have has a context sensor, GPS. It tells Google Maps or Waze or whatever it is the map technology you use, And then the software is able to provision you just the knowledge you need, the tiles, the turn direction, as you need them, which is far more efficient to consume. It's a more pleasant, much more rewarding experience and much more efficient and value generating than unfurling a paper map. Okay, but the most important thing that it's doing, we haven't discussed yet, is that the maps are creating and collecting data about what all the drivers are doing. Right? And then it's producing insights like ETA. It's helping Google refine its turn algorithms. It's helping Google identify a road maybe that they haven't seen yet because your phone is telling them that you're driving down a spot where they don't think there's a road. Now they can go looking for the road, right? This is what's actually happening. And they're improving the experience and the quality of the insights by collecting that data, which now we trust it more, so we're more likely to use it. If Google Maps took you to some place that was the wrong destination, and they used to do it at the beginning, you wouldn't trust it, you wouldn't use it, right? And so this idea of a closed loop learning system that's present in navigation is extremely important. Everybody agree, navigation is pretty much what we all want to use now. So the metaphor extends to engineering. So let's do that. The old way, or it probably shouldn't be the old way, it should be more the current way. So the current way we manage knowledge, just like the map, is in a static document. It may be correct when we publish it, but it may have had some decay. We don't know. We don't know what. And we try to throw all the possible turns to people and say, hey, you got to figure out the right turns, but here's all possible turns. I mean, it's kind of what we're telling our engineering folks when we're asking them to reuse knowledge. And to most end users, it looks like this. They feel like this. And if they feel like this, are they going to contribute? They're going to close the loop and provide expertise back to the system? The answer is no. And that's why most of the lessons learned processes we've seen at other companies, it's 100%. Nobody's ever said their lessons learned system works yet. So I don't know. We go to different companies every week, a few companies a month for sure. And we always ask that question. I've yet really to see someone say, our lessons learned system is awesome. It works great, prevents a lot of mistakes. People are just doing it because it's a checkbox in their system. It doesn't have to be that way. Let's get value out of that effort. So what we're saying is we're going to do something more akin to navigation. What we're going to do is manage the knowledge and ready it for reuse and then provision it so people aren't searching for it. We're going to make sure that it's useful and we're going to track the data about how it gets used. And so this idea of a knowledge packet comes out of that. So the analog of the knowledge packet in the navigation is maybe the map tile or the turn algorithm. So we're now going to forget about, let's jump ahead here, to get there. We're not going to manage documents. We're going to manage these units of knowledge. We're going to get rid of all the document bloat because managing documents is difficult. The granularity's off, how you publish it, getting multiple stakeholders to agree on a single document. We can make that process far more efficient and improve what happens by managing the knowledge more directly. So we're going to kind of get rid of documents entirely and kind of focus on these essential units of know-how that we call this process calls, the knowledge-aware technique calls a knowledge packet. And then we are going to provision those in the same way that the nav app does. So in this picture, it's a little bit harder to follow, but imagine this thing over here. This thing is the engineering work. Whether it's you're installing that, you're PMing it, you're designing it, you're whatever it is you're doing, that's the engineering work. That has context. It's for this kind of customer. We're in this kind of phase of the project. We can then provision the right knowledge packets out of this crowdsourced or knowledge ready for reuse library and bring it into something we call an assessment control. So Dan mentioned knowledge packet and assessment control. These are essential elements of the overall process. And the assessment control now knows how to deal with these knowledge packets and present them to the user in a way that we can not only understand how they get used, but collect data about how it's going to be used so we can produce useful insights and make everybody understand what's happening in the knowledge process. That produces value for the company, for the individual, and that causes people to want to participate in the process to contribute to knowledge in the long run. So the idea here isn't specific really to engineering or to product development or manufacturing. The idea is this knowledge-aware process really applies to any place where knowledge is reused. And it's hard for me to fathom a whole lot of engineering where knowledge isn't getting reused, right? Certainly it becomes less as you get into R&D type of projects, but even in R&D, there's some amount of knowledge that's getting reused. The process of R&D itself is knowledge, right? And so the idea is knowledge aware as a technique can be applied from studio design all the way through plant floor operations and everything in between, right? It's a general process that can break down silos and cause knowledge sharing to happen where it would never happen before. So that's kind of the fundamental concept of knowledge aware and abstract, and I want to kind of show you how this kind of works in a little more practical sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to another circle and talk about fundamentals. So as I mentioned, and as Dan mentioned, there's these ideas of knowledge packet and assessment. So the assessment control, the analog is the nav app on your cell phone. The assessment control is going to take knowledge ready for reuse and provide it to the end user in a way that is useful. So I'm just going to show you some screenshots before we get into the actual demo. And what you see is here is each row in this picture of an assessment control represents a knowledge packet that's been provisioned, meaning dynamically allocated based on the context of the user. I am trying to get through a design review event for this kind of product at this stage of the process. I don't want to go through everybody's design guide. I just want the elements that apply to my product in my phase, right? And so they show up here, and then I have connectivity to the original source of knowledge. So this assessment control understands the knowledge packet, understands how the knowledge packet gets provisioned, and is going to collect data about how it gets used by the end user to provide feedback to all the stakeholders that might need that feedback. And these assessment controls can look very different depending on the kind of knowledge that's being applied. So I showed you kind of a very basic view, and here's a process view. And for those of you that go to these later sessions, these differences will become very clear and very practical. It really just depends on the knowledge type and the kind of process that we're attempting to use the knowledge-aware technique for. Underlying these assessment controls are these things called knowledge packets, right? And so these are these unitized, granular, actionable units of know-how that have been readied for reuse. And once we do that, and it's actually less effort than managing documents, we can provision them. And so what they look like individually really depends on the type of knowledge. So this one is a picture of a very typical kind of engineering constraint. It's a little small here, but it's representing some parametric boundaries of design, but they can look different. I'll show you another picture. This is a knowledge packet that represents a decision process. We want to make consistent decisions. We want to make it in the same way. We want to track the way the decision was made. We want traceability of that decision. We can use a knowledge packet about process to do that. So with that said, what I want to do now is give a little bit of a demo. Let me see if I need to relog in here. Nope. Okay, so this is an Auros screen, and we're going to kind of walk through the basic elements of this knowledge-aware process. So I'm going to go over to assessment controls. I'm going to go into my assessments. And so each of these rows represent an assessment. So this is like a trip in, if we go back to the analog of the navigation, each of these rows represents a trip I'm taking that are being tracked, and the knowledge is being provisioned dynamically. So I'm going to open one of these up. So this is an assessment control, a very basic one. You'll see more interesting ones as we go throughout the day and in the customer presentations tomorrow. But each row represents an individual unit of know-how that's been provisioned based on the context of this assessment. This, again, it could be a project, it could be a customer, it could be a variety of different things that cause just the right knowledge packets to show up here. And we can read them, we can go and look at the original source, but basically the idea is to come to some level of conformance, right? So I understand it. Now, as soon as I say, yes, I'm passing, I'm meeting this, the stakeholders of that individual knowledge packet can be notified. It's tracking the data about when and how long it takes and all these things that we can now produce insights from. That's the basic operation. But let's get into some of the interesting aspects that we mentioned that navigation offers versus paper maps. So we talk about provisioning. So what happens if I'm on this trip and there's a learning somewhere else? So let's simulate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this assessment. And I'm going to go back to my smart tiles here, and I'm going to put on a different hat. I'm an engineer in a different location, or a different team, and we're going to, author a new knowledge packet. And there's a template, so I'm selecting one of the templates. And it doesn't really matter what our learning is here. Let's just say new learning for now. I'm just giving it a basic title because we're not trying to talk about how the knowledge is documented here. We just want to show how it gets provisioned, right? So let's just assume that we create a representation of new learning, and we'll get into the knowledge modeling and these other higher level attributes of the knowledge packet itself later. Right now we just want to talk about the provisioning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer a few questions about how this thing applies to my company. It's in a category, it's in a certain domain. Here we're taking a business unit. And it's in a certain part of our product structure. Let's say it applies to these 3 nodes in our product structure. So this may be an assembly breakdown and maybe a process breakdown. But the idea is that the technology provides a way to merge metadata across different kinds of projects and domains in a way that then Auros is able to accurately provision the knowledge to the context. So again, the assessment is the context specific. We just created new learning. We don't even care who needs it. We just answer the right questions. The metadata is there. So now I'm going to self-publish. So again, this could be in a different country. It could be in a different business unit. And we can come back to our assessment. I'm just going to reload it. Oops. Did I publish it? Did it whip? I'm going to edit it one more time and then publish it. I didn't actually publish it. Save. Publish. Go back to my assessment. Did I close it? Maybe I did. Wrong window. I'll just go back to my assessment controls. And the visual cue, if you notice in the upper left-hand corner, there's a yellow, and it's saying to the user that the trip you're taking has now got a new possible turn. Based on the context of this trip, that knowledge packet I just authored, the system understands that it applies and now can be provisioned. Now here we're not doing it automatically. It can be automatic, but I'm going to just show you what it's really saying. So I click on this, and it's saying there's a new learning. Here it is. And we're going to say, yep, we're going to take it. And now that turn is in here. Now if we had added all the knowledge modeling and readying for use and getting it approved and putting a knowledge model in it, it now can participate along with all the other knowledge of provisioning. So in this example, what you're seeing is that the knowledge is the process of aggregating and collecting the knowledge is completely separate from the process of where it's reused, and they're connected in a way that's intelligent so that as knowledge gets created, it gets provisioned without a user searching for it to the people that need it, ready for them to reuse. Now, if I here am using this assessment and I had this experience, I'm like, oh, this is how knowledge gets disseminated. I now have the incentive that if I learn something, I have confidence I'll put it into the system. The story I always tell people why this is so true is when I got out of college a really long time ago, and it was the dawn of email. And my area manager in my first plant did not read his email. He was used to a different model of communication. He would, he didn't understand the effort that it would produce benefit. But then we started doing a Mazda program, and the people were overseas. And of course, he then started to understand that if he needed to communicate with someone in real time, the inter-office memoranda wasn't going to work. And he started writing his own email because he started to have the expectation that people will reuse it, right? Will read it when they come in the morning. We all go through the effort now of writing emails every day. Does anybody not write an email on a given day? We all do. But if you did not have the expectation that people were going to read them, would you do it? You wouldn't, right? So we have these lessons learned databases that people have no expectation of reuse. Why are they going to put a lesson learned in there? But when you close the loop in this process and you see the knowledge showing up, the loop closes and it becomes a mode of communication, not a technology or thing to check. It becomes the way people communicate. And we see this at our bigger customers. People will create knowledge packets. It's not something that seems like, oh, how do we get people to write knowledge packets? People will do it because it's the most efficient way to communicate. It's hard to get your mind around until you actually experience it, but it's just like email. People will start doing it because it's the best way to communicate. Okay, let's get on to the next knowledge-aware aspect of assessment controls, this thing we call look-across. So I mentioned that, important to the cell phone navigation metaphor is that the nav app is collecting data about what other people are doing and giving you insights like, hey, it's going to take you 15 minutes to get home today instead of 12 minutes or 7 minutes, right? And you might be late for dinner, you can call the wife and tell her. But what we can do with the knowledge-aware technique, because it's ready for reuse and we understand the units of knowledge are managed at the right level of granularity, we can understand, hey, this knowledge packet that's been provisioned to me has been used by these 3 other people in the last month, 6 months, year, and someone had the same problem I'm having. Here's their issue, here's their data results, here's the full discussion of their issue. Just 2 clicks, I understand everybody who used that same unit of know-how, what they did, how they did, what problems they had, did they not have problems, what discussions they have, what file attachment, what evidence. The knowledge is connected. And so the system is collecting the data and putting it and organizing it in a way that makes it extremely reuse very easy. So you cannot do this in document-based processes. It's not possible. You need to have granular units of know-how. We need to know specifically how they get to the context. We need to know what happens to them in the context. And we need to know how things are related to each other. And this idea of knowledge packet assessment does all of this with very little additional effort, no additional effort, with far more impact and value. So this kind of concludes my, how much time do I have? I have 10 more minutes, okay. So I'm going to take it a little bit further. So in the static world of knowledge, right, you might have a design guide and you have documents and you're interacting by reading, right? And I've shown you that knowledge packets themselves can be dynamically provisioned based on context. I've shown you that once it's there, we can understand what happens to it, and then we can make that available. If they're doing a similar project over there and you're doing a similar project over here, I have instant read across to what they're doing. But we want to talk about what a knowledge packet really can do, and the idea is that knowledge can be modeled. I originally suggested to you when we started this demo that you can attest that we passed something, right? We're going to come over here and we're going to pick I pass. So one of the big things about knowledge aware is that we want to, it's okay to do attestation, but it is not the way of the future. This is the one that kind of where we start to get deep and heavy. We want to have these units of knowledge readied for reuse to the point where they're models. And the reason is if we make these knowledge packets more intelligent models, they can interact with the model-based world of the future. Does anyone not agree that our engineering processes are becoming more and more model-based, right? We got some KB guys over here from Denso, we got design automation people over here from GM, and I know there's more of you out there. And it's not just CAD, it's CAE, it's process modeling. The world is becoming model-based. So it's my belief, my personal belief, very strongly held view, is that the model-based world of the future is going to require knowledge to be provisioned, right? And if it's provisioned and it can work with these models, and that's what Auros originally the idea behind knowledge aware was, we can provision knowledge and have it interact with these other models, with the models we're already using, CAD models, CA models, process models, and provide intelligence to them. Now we're unlocking exponentially more value with the same amount of effort, right? And so what I'm saying is, instead of a testation, which is of limited, it's good, but it's of limited fidelity, right? I said I passed it, but I could be getting lazy today, right? I'm getting asked the same question, did you pass or fail, on each of these knowledge packets, but they could be, completely different kinds of concepts, but it's the same answer, so I can get very lazy. But if we model knowledge, so I'm going to open up 4, and I'm going to place in a value of 9. I don't know. Now I'm being asked a question, and it's interacting with a model, and the model is evaluating status for me. The question I'm getting asked every time is specific to the parameterization of the knowledge itself. Now here it's an engineering kind of thing, it's a parameter. But it doesn't have to be. It could be, did you sequence in this order? Did you have these four things were present? And, this is the location here versus there. And we can produce models of knowledge that are very simple, but when aggregated together from multiple stakeholders within an assessment control and tied to another model, we can now apply vast quantities of knowledge with high fidelity with almost no effort. So all the things we're trying to do in a design review event where we're sitting there saying, yeah, I did it, here's my evidence, is now completely automated. And now our incentive to contribute to the knowledge models is huge. And now we put knowledge in and we can consider more things than we ever dreamed of considering in an engineering event with many stakeholders as possible. So really what we're doing here, it's way more simple than you could even imagine, is the knowledge packet has a couple different lightweight modeling capabilities built into it. One is the value table, and the other is the method. And if you come to the advanced one, we get into these quite a bit. But the value table here is, that little table there is a model. That's all it is. It's just, it looks simple, but it's a deterministic way of representing what could be written by 10 authors, I guarantee 10 different ways. But given the knowledge packet, it's always offered the same way, right, in this model, and it's deterministic. I had some experiences with some of the companies that are present here where someone who's just being introduced to the idea of writing a value table told me that, I didn't realize that how ambiguous I was being when I wrote it in a sentence in a design guide. Because when you have to create a model, you understand how it's going to interact with the world, you get to test it, and now you have a certain amount of completion. And to the end user now, they're getting better signal all the time. So this model, here it says maximum Nostrum Vix, is 2.45 is a maximum. The rules engine behind our technology, Auros, is able to take that value, and if you're below that value, evaluate to pass. And if you're above that value, evaluate to fail, or to yellow, or to blue, or to green, provide end user messaging. But the idea is that we can ready knowledge for reuse with a slight, tiny bit more effort. We can take text and turn it into a robust model that can now interact with the model-based future unlimited. Unlimited. It'll get to where it needs to go, when it needs to get to, where it needs to get to go, and it will interact with those systems. And I know there's a bunch of you out there that are working on this stuff now, where these knowledge packets are being provisioned, are interacting with model-based worlds, and producing tremendous results. So I guess I'm being heavy-handed, but I truly believe that this approach of separating knowledge, creating a robust way of capturing it, providing the incentive through feedback for people to capture knowledge, and then presenting it back to the model-based future is the way it's going to be done, whether you use a technology like Auros or not. And that's kind of why the IKAA is an organization. The idea is that's coming. Let's promote the idea of how to do better knowledge management in a way where knowledge can be provisioned and turned, as Dan said, activated within your process by readying it for reuse. The document encapsulation of knowledge is going to go away. One way or the other, that's going to go away. Lessons learned database, it's in a database, it's still a document. If it's a text, it's just a document. If we're not thinking about how we wrap it, merge metadata to provision, and turn it into a unit of know-how that's a dependable granularity that can be provisioned and can interact with the model-based world, it's just not going to work. So that's kind of what Knowledge Aware is all about. The assessment control and the knowledge packet are these primary concepts that are in the process, but it's all about changing from the static document map that's published with everything that you could possibly want and it's decaying as soon as it's on the bookshelf to an active, organic, living process where knowledge is continuously crowdsourced and provisioned as it's needed, and the searching for knowledge is now obviated, and data is being collected and turned into insight about that knowledge. That's really what it's all about. Hopefully that's not a surprise. You're all here. So that's what I got for you today. So hopefully, again, I'm looking for feedback on the specific ideas, how it's presented. If you got ideas on how you think the concepts should be better presented, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.